a senior at Garfield, for his outstanding performance on offense and defense.
There's Jordan, makes a stutter step inside, breaks a tackle. He's off and running. He's going to take it all the way. He's going to take it all the way on the sideline. Oh, my goodness, 65 yards.
Congratulations to Garfield High School senior Quentin Jordan, this week's Rainier Avenue Radio Metro League Athlete of the Week.
This is Big Poppy, host of Jazz from the Cabinets. Join me each week for a listening tour of the first century of jazz, an eclectic mix of Dixieland, big band, cool jazz, bebop, contemporary jazz, world jazz, all jazz in all forms. That's Jazz from the Cabinets with Big Poppy on Rainier Avenue Radio, streaming worldwide on RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Phil-Am Radio, servicing the Filipino and Filipino Americans all over the world. Phil-Am Radio, streaming live in the internet every Tuesday from 1 o'clock to 2:30 p.m. Seattle, USA time. We are your hosts, Kuya Bert Kawili, Emma Heron, and
Manny Panganiban.
Phil-Am Radio.
RainierAvenueRadio.world is your 24/7 digital media hub. Tune in at RainierAvenueRadio.world. Also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and TuneIn apps.
Hey! Welcome. This is Brenda Charles-Edwards, the host of Seniors Matter. We are live every Friday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on www.RainierAvenueRadio.world, your community radio station. You can also listen to us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch TV, the Rainier Avenue Radio App, and Alexa. Seniors Matter invites a variety of guests to discuss issues, activities. They may impact the lives of older adults, their families, and the community. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments section on Facebook. This is Women's History Month, and we're commemorating and encouraging the study, observance, and celebration of the vital role of women in American history. You would think this was my first show. Former Evergreen Tacoma faculty member Barbara Laniers cast her first ballot in 1964, and she has voted ever since. Because she grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in the 1950s, she knows her vote has the power to change things. Why else would some people have tried so hard to keep her from doing it? Welcome to the show, Ms. Barbara Laniers.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Oh, it is always a pleasure to talk to you and hear your voice. So, Barbara, what's been going on with you?
Oh, I've retired. I've been just observing the landscape. And since this is Women's History Month, and we look at what's happening to women today, the news this morning, I noticed, was shocking. Television commentator dared to attack women serving in the military who were expecting a baby, who were pregnant.
What?
And I thought it was strange. I thought we had moved beyond that.
Right.
And I thought this is interesting since the attacker, white male, had never served in the military. So it raises the question of how far women have come. Is this still a male-dominated society, which we know it is? But more importantly, we need to take a look at what undercurrents, undergirds all of these notions about women and their place in this society. And one of the things that I'm sure you know, as well as all other women listening, this is not just a socially your role is defined, which it is, but there is a legal underpinning of that. Because we always talk about the fact that, slaves were considered property, chattel, and owned by the slave owners. They were. But if you look at the history of women generally, Black women, but white women, all women, early on in the history of the law, women were considered the property of their husbands. And American law is primarily based upon English common law. And there was a notion in English common law that inheritance was through the males, and that was called primogeniture. And what that meant was that everything owned by women, when she married, that of the husband controlled all of her property, the children. Nothing that she brought to that marriage belonged to her. And that was a matter of law in England. Inheritance rights and all of those things. Women were denied their property rights. And this spilled over into American common law by and large. If you look at early statutes and what could happen to women, you saw the same notions about the status of women. They were considered the property of men. And that legal status comes out of a whole panoply of legal and social notions. And we can't forget that the church played a part in that. The whole notion about Eve and her sin, that she made him do it as if Adam was not a thinking person. But these underpinnings, both religiously and legally, was used to construct the role of women, not only in this society, but particularly in English society, which has a major influence on what developed in America with regard to the role of women. We, of course, know that slave women had no right that anybody was bound to respect. So her children were the property of the slave owner, so they could be taken away, snatched from her at any age, and sold to anybody the highest bidder. But if you look at white women at that time, although they weren't slaves, they had very few, if any, rights. And they were subject to all the social constraints that the law allowed. And they were harshly enforced in a lot of respects. And if you read, like, for example, the Scarlet Letter, I would submit the woman did not commit adultery alone. But who was forced in the Massachusetts colony to wear the Scarlet Letter? The woman.
Right.
And if you look at all of the laws that came about during the colonial period, who was tried for witchcraft? The women. And so we look at we focus on, the women's rights, the movement for social and economic rights for women. And we should. But in order to understand where we are today, we need to understand where we've come from and how far we have to go. For an example, in the state of Washington, we always think about Washington's a blue state. It's a very liberal state. But if you look into the legal history of Washington, until the middle or late 70s, women had no rights that men were bound to respect. You had family immunity laws, which meant that the man was the head of the community. He was in charge of everything, not only physically, but economically. He was he was the manager of the property. Women could not enter into any kind of contract that impacted property or her well-being without the consent of her husband. And I'll tell you, my aunt, when I came to Washington, my aunt had a lot of friends whose husbands died, and they found out then and there that their homes, who they had worked and helped to, thought they were paying off the mortgage, was mortgaged to the hilt. Mm-hmm. For what reason? They didn't know, because those husbands, men, did not have to explain to the women what they were doing with the marital property, because they were the managers as a matter of law and a matter of fact. So they could do what they wanted with it without the consent of the wives. And family immunity laws allowed men a grip on the family. Like I remember one of my friends said, If Pop was angry, he could come in and decide he was going to beat everybody, starting with Mom and every kid in the house. That's the amount of control that they had. Now, this didn't change until the 80s, 70s, late 70s, 80s, and 90s, when we had domestic violence laws to protect the rights of women. But before that, the control, even in this state, was the province of men. And some of those attitudes of women as my property still prevail today. If I can't have her, nobody's going to have her. So you have resultant violence, and women being killed by men who just think that women are still their property. And that
Well, when you talk
about the terms and conditions of one of the women live their lives. And even today, despite Roe v. Wade, who's leading the charge to erode that? And
well, Barbara, I was just thinking about the pregnancy.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking about the pregnancy part, because you say, we're a liberal state, but I do remember when we were having the abortion issues and how women are being told, it's not really your body. Yes, you're carrying the child, but it's not really your body. And we as men know what's best for you.
That's right. It's not your body. I remember one young student came up to me and said, well, it's my baby too. I said, right, it's your seed. But ultimately, that woman has the right to decide what happens. Well, that's not fair. And I said, it's not fair, but it is legal under the court's decision in Roe v. Wade. Well, we need to change that. I said, well, you have the right to, but the work to change whatever you want to change. But the reality is, under Roe v. Wade, the woman has control of her body. It's her body to control. And she has the right to decide whether she wanted to terminate a pregnancy early on, up to 6 weeks in just a period. But, a lot of these laws, even though Roe v. Wade is, I don't know how old, you still find folks and establishments and institutions as a matter of a political thing on anti-abortion, and they want to erode that. And women, we need to look out for. The court has been stacked against women, us, and our rights. Because what the Republicans wanted to do since Ronald Reagan is change the composition of the court. And guess what? The federal judiciary. And under the last president, that has been a success with his power of appointment. 3 justices on the United States Supreme Court changes the balance to a conservative Supreme Court. And they have made legendary appointments to the lower federal judiciary. And people look at you when you say, why are you worried about that? These folks have life tenure, folks. And that and some of their attitudes are so draconian with regard to women, their role in society, and their rights, that they're draconian.
Yeah. Barbara, I was thinking about the elections. I was just thinking about the elections we just had and how the right to vote for women and also the rights of African Americans is taking a turn, especially in Georgia. And that's not a good turn.
Yeah, if you can't win at the ballot fairly, so what are you going to do? Change the law, go back to the Jim Crow era. And all of this, what we see happening today, and it's sad, it's predicated on the big lie. And you know what? What is so painful about that to me is that some women buy into the big lie. We won and we are being cheated. You didn't win. The truth of the matter is that this is one of the most fair elections, at least, and this according to males who were in that, administration.
Right.
So why do some of us, we support things that contrary to our interests. But that too has a historic meaning because we always say we are dependent on the male for our economic well-being. And some of us are. But we've got to look at what kind of legacy are we leaving for our daughters and our granddaughters? What are we saying to them when we buy into and promote, regressive laws with regard to women, their place in society, their role, and why do we as women, and since that was they've got to prove. How many times have you heard that? Well, she's got to prove that she deserved that job.
Right.
Rarely ever ask a men except the men of color.
Correct. If you're just tuning in,
there's a foregone conclusion that if you are a white male, that you automatically deserve whatever position you get. And there is none of this debate about whether he was qualified.
if you're just tuning in, you're listening live to Seniors Matter with your host, Brenda Charles-Edwards, on www.rainieravenueradio.world, your community radio station. We're here every Friday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can listen to us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch TV, the Rainier Avenue Radio App, and Alexa. Do you need financial documents notarized? Are you a senior that needs documents read to you for clarity or completion? Call me, Brenda, at Black Orchid Notary, 206-683-2636. Tell me where, I'll meet you there. There's this quote that I like. It says, I always vote because in my mind, I recall the martyrs. This right was bought with blood, so we have to honor that by voting at every opportunity. And do you know who that quote was by? Ms. Barbara Laniers. Now back to my guest, Ms. Barbara Laniers, who, if one thing matters more than voting to her, it's informed voting. Barbara, let's talk about informed voting.
I have a friend who I've taught many classes on politics and law with, and he's always advised the students, you have to vote your interest and not your ignorance. And when students would ask, well, what do you mean by that, Professor Bacho? Then he said, look at the programs, look beyond just what folks say and what they mean by it. How do policies impact you and your families and your community?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll condition your vote on that. And don't just vote for folks because it's what they say sound good to you. And one of the biggest scams we bought during the last election, I'm sorry that a lot of women voted their ignorance and not their interest. And it was out there what the views of not only the candidates for president, but what the party's views were about women, their roles and their rights and responsibilities were. But they were so angry, and Hillary Clinton is a crook. Where? And I had one student said to me, well, I don't like her because of the way she treated those women who had an affair with her husband. And I said, let's as we say in law, let's interrogate that. If somebody brought to you a group of women who admit that they'd had an affair with your husband, are you going to embrace them? Think about what it is you're saying. You're expecting this woman who is educated, who is accomplished, and all the things we say that women need to be, to embrace and say, it's all right, I understand, and I accept the fact that you're had an affair with my husband, and I forgive you, and all of that. And I said, and you didn't consider the fact that the one who brought these women was one of the biggest cheaters in American history. So why would you put those kinds of burdens on that woman when you don't put it on men?
Right. Exactly.
And, Professor Laniers, I thought about what you said, and you're absolutely right. We do put on women much more than we put on men. That's what I want to do. Just think about that. Think about what we require of each other that we don't require of men. And that's the primary issue.
You couldn't have said it any better. So, Barbara, just to switch gears a little bit, you're a lawyer, you're a teacher, you've been a radio host, you're a community leader. So of all of these careers that you've had, which you have chosen to educate others about issues affecting their lives, which one is giving you the most joy? And
All
why?
of them, really, but being an educator was the most joy because you're dealing with young minds, you're dealing with them at levels where you hope that they, as the future leaders and whatever, that they would think about what it is you're trying to impart to them and do some analysis. But one of the things that concerns me is that they don't read a lot. Their information comes from Facebook, YouTube, and all this. And I'm not against electronics and those things. I'm not against technology per se. But like I said, you need to think about what it is somebody is saying about certain issues and do your own research.
That is very key. And the young people.
First lady, you're right. Sometimes the things some folks they're throwing shade on other folks, and they're using I'm not that hip to contemporary things. That's what you mean by throwing shade. Maybe they don't. If they disagree with the opinion, they report out their disagreement as fact. And I said it's on you to do your own research and come to your own conclusion. And you can listen to each and everybody. But in the end, all of us have to do our own research and decide for ourselves what is the right course, not only for us, but we live in a community. And what is the right course for the community? You see what's going on with the debate about, the wearing of masks. That, instead of following the science, we're in an argument about, I have a right to decide this. Well, no, you don't. Your right ends at the end of your nose. And if it's a public health issue, to me, the community survival is a part of that formula that should inform your decision. And not this political nonsense about you're trampling on my rights when you say, when the scientists say as a matter of health that we need to wear masks, we need to be be vaccinated and all of those kinds of issues. But we take the notion of individual liberty sometimes to extremes. But there are times in the law when the public interest supersedes your individual rights. For example, the common thing is you do not have the right to shout fire in a crowded theater when there is in fact not a fire. But when you look at what's happening with COVID,
oh boy,
there's the same kind of notions about do you have the right to not wear a mask in those circumstances where what you're doing will impact the health and well-being of the total community? We need to consider that. And
I'm happy to say
as mothers and as fathers, all of us need to consider that. That shouldn't be the burden of any one group or any one person. It is a collective action. Instead of saying, I saw this morning the pharmacist saying, well, I support that, but the individual have the right to decide. No, they don't. This is a critical condition circumstance. It's the pandemic. And
it's life and death.
Impact the community. So we need to all be concerned about the greater good and not our just little selfish ways of being. And if you don't have a medical reason not to wear a mask, it's not going to hurt you or me or anybody to do that.
Yesterday, I was working at one of the COVID vaccine shots, and I saw you there, and I know you got your second one. I've gotten my second one in my family too. And, it's we have to look at the larger picture. Until we get this under control, we can't go back to being normal. You're not going to be able to hug your loved ones. And that's a part of our culture, is to be able to touch and hug. So if for no other reason,
all the, the barbecues and the cookouts and the cook-ins and whatever,
Right. And I noticed that
we've got to do the things that get us back to wholeness,
Exactly. And I think our governor has been doing a good job. And of course, our current president has been providing this for us so we can get back there, because it's not about any one individual. It's about the whole unit. And so, you know how they talk about it takes a village to raise a child. Well, getting the vaccine is the village that's going to save all of us.
That's right.
So, Barbara, what's next on your agenda?
I agree with you. And for all the young women and men, all the women and men who are there to see that we get those vaccines and to direct us, we owe them a big thing. Yes, we owe them a debt of gratitude, because they're taking time out of their lives to help all of us get safe, secure vaccines,
Exactly.
And we say thank you to them and express our gratitude and support them in terms of being sure that we do the things that all of us can do to have a safe community. Because we do ultimately live in community.
Yes, most definitely. We are not out here alone.
So right.
Just to update everyone, I wanted to let you know that this Friday, the East Side Catholic is playing at Rainier Beach at 7. Nathan Hill is at Franklin on Saturday at 6. And I would just like to say to those people that might be interested in knowing what the best gift you can give yourself and your loved one is joining me on Zoom for a group or individual session on end-of-life planning. You can reach me at 206-683-2636. Barbara, I know that you have a wealth of information, and we only have about 2 minutes left. So I want to know, what's going to be the next thing that you're going to be doing for the community other than what you already do?
I don't know, whatever is needed. I try to give legal advice for free when I can. And I just try to help and talk to young folk wherever they are. They'll call me on the phone and drop by and try to talk. I'm an elder now. And so what do elders do? They are there to impart their knowledge, their experience, and whatever I can do to help, that's what I'll do.
All right. Sounds good to me.
I don't see individual, but for the community. And if there's a community campaign that needs my help and my voice, I am here to lend my help, my voice.
That's wonderful. Well, I just like to say we'll have to have you back on so we have a little more time to get everything else that's going on. But bottom line is, please vote, and vote intelligently. Thank you to my audience for listening. And thank you to you, Barbara Laniers. She's on the phone with us, for joining us today. The coronavirus special edition is next. Be safe. Live your life like it's golden. Blessings. Bye, Barbara.
All right. Thank you and goodbye.